One of the reasons I love witchcraft and I love magic so much is the connection that it gives me to other people through our bond of magic.
Come in, this is your fire, this is your home. Enjoy some of the warmth.
In the ritual itself, we cast a circle, we drew in power, and then we release that power back out into the universe.
We're charging this fire for power and for honor.
I cast this circle to protect us from all negative and positive energies and forces that's compatible with the energies raised herein. So mote it be.
So mote it be.
And I wish to thank and honor my ancestors and all of our ancestors. And may we move past their trauma so that the scars of the past do not continue to persist into the future. So mote it be.
So mote it be.
Merry do we meet, merry do we part, and merry do we meet again.
I wanted to be respectful of their beliefs. Witchcraft appears to be alive and well, so if you practice it, certainly you want to make clear that these outbreaks were caused by something else. Catherine House is an author who writes fiction, but she's also a historian, and her books are generally set in the Salem area. They talk about witches.
Hi, I'm Catherine.
Hi.
Welcome to the Rebecca Nurse homestead. This house was built around the 1670s.
Oh my, this is not made for us tall people, is it?
This is the home of Rebecca Nurse, who was accused of witchcraft during the Salem witch trials.
The reason that the ceilings are so low was for heat conservation, because in the 1690s, it was even colder in New England during that time period.
Rebecca Nurse did not get along with her neighbors. Because of this, she was executed for the crime of witchcraft.
Rebecca Nurse declared, "I'm innocent, and God will clear my innocency."
So right now we're investigating the 1692 Salem witch panic and its possible connection to the incident at the high school in Danvers in 2013, which I know you wrote a book that has a very similar premise to that. You were inspired by an event that happened earlier in New York, right?
I was inspired by a similar outbreak that happened in Leroy, New York. That was when a group of girls became very physically ill. They had sort of weird tics and weird problems, and no one could figure out what was wrong. What had happened was the girls had conversion disorder, and that's where you're under so much stress that your body converts it into physical symptoms. And when it happens in a group, that's called mass psychogenic illness. Obviously, I was thinking about the adolescent girls who kicked off the accusations at Salem.
Right.
Given the gender politics of the time and that women were to be seen and not heard, how do you think that factored into the fact that females were finally being listened to?
Imagine if your job at 11 is to do housework all the time and not have any playtime or anything like that, and then all of a sudden something happens where everyone in your community is suddenly paying attention to you and saying, "Oh, don't worry, don't do any work right now. We're all going to focus on you." How seductive of an inversion of power is that?
It gives incentive for the behavior to continue and probably escalate. Taking that information into consideration, mass psychogenic illness is something logical that we have to consider. Could it have caused either the 1692 or the high school outbreak? Conversations with two former students suggest the outbreak at a recent high school in Danvers may be linked to the strange behaviors that sparked the Salem witch trials. I've repeatedly heard there's something weird about the area surrounding the school. With so many theories floating around, I need to see if the high school students who came down with fits a few years ago were victims of something in the soil. We need to check to see if this was environmental. Both students said that most victims played soccer on this field. And because Salem has such an odd history, I'm taking a second sample from the cemetery, which is not far from the foundation of the original home of the Salem outbreak. I'm going to have the samples analyzed to see if there's anything unusual in the soil.
I have
an idea for something that might help aid this investigation. Witches have our own version of forensics, and I think it might help Jen gain some additional insight into what it is we're trying to uncover here.
Hey guys, how are you?
Hi.
The tarot is typically 78 cards that are pictures of our lives, things we go through on an everyday basis.
So how do we use these as a tool to actually get to a specific conclusion? Is that possible?
This isn't where I would go if I'm looking for a scientific answer, but if I'm looking for guidance along a path, or if I'm looking for spiritual insight, this is a tool that I would use for that.
I am interested in seeing if a reading is possible to shed more light on the investigation that we're doing. Is that something you do?
Sure, let's see what they say. So where you are right now is the priest, okay? And the priest is talking about a couple of different things. It's talking about finding yourself, finding balance. Right now, you guys are trying to find your bearings. You're trying to figure it out, trying to draw conclusions, because not only is the priest centered with himself, he's centered with nature, he's centered with logic, he's centered with all of those different things. And Queen of Swords, I think, is very much representative of you, being very focused on knowledge, focused on finding the truth.
Oh, Jen has big Queen of Swords energy, for sure, yeah.
I definitely see you as more of a page, just because you have a lot of enthusiasm and where you're going. So, the Knight of Cups. Now, knights are really important. They're the people that are the most motivated, and you know they're gonna get the job done. The only person preventing you guys from finding out the truth, finding out the information that you want, is yourselves.
So if we're not able to solve this case definitively,
It's only your
because
fault.
I stood in my own way.
You only have yourself to blame.
It was interesting to do the tarot card reading. Do I think that it shed any light on the investigation? Absolutely not. Was it fun for entertainment? Sure. We've heard conflicting theories about what triggered the Salem outbreaks. To cover more ground, Sarah and I are splitting up to investigate alternate leads. Former students suggested that the outbreak at their high school might have been connected to exposure to something on the grounds of the campus. I've brought soil samples collected from 2 spots in Danvers to American Analytics, a leading environmental and chemotherapy contamination testing lab.
We analyzed for chromium, lead, arsenic, mercury, metals that are known to be highly toxic and carcinogenic.
Hey, Tally, what'd you find?
Very interesting.
Yeah?
In particular, we found elevated concentrations of arsenic.
I've brought soil samples collected from 2 spots in Danvers to American Analytics, a leading environmental and chemotherapy contamination testing lab.
We do have your laboratory results.
Okay.
We found elevated concentrations of arsenic. In the sample that you had labeled Cemetery 1, we did find concentrations of 47 milligrams per kilogram.
That seems very high.
Well, the EPA screening levels are between 0.27 and 0.68 milligrams per kilogram.
And so the sample tested 0.47 or 47?
It was 47.
So is it possible that you could have elevated levels of arsenic, not from contamination, but from the geology of an area?
It is possible. Typically, we see elevated levels like these of heavy metals from major industrial processes.
And what did the results from the soccer field show?
The levels of arsenic were still above the EPA screening levels at 12 and 11 milligrams per kilogram, respectively.
The numbers were really alarming. When you have a screening level that's below 1, and then you have samples that are 11 and 12 and 47, that, to me, you have to look further into it.
One of the most famous accusers is Ann Putnam, who at just 12 years old accused 62 people of witchcraft. Later in life, Ann made a formal apology for her role in the witch trials. I'm wondering if there's anything in her apology that sheds light on what triggered the incident. The Danvers Archival Center has many rare manuscripts from the witch trial period. And like a lot of people in the area, archivist Richard Trask has a personal connection to 1692. As I understand it, you are one of the main people who've gone around collecting documents pertaining to the trials. Is that right?
I've been involved in one way or another in the witchcraft since I was a kid. I found out early on from my grandparents that I was related to Mary Esty, Rebecca Norris's sister.
Wow.
And Mary was hanged.
As I understand it, what you have right here includes a confession from Ann Putnam herself.
Right. This is the original volume, and everything inside is the original paper. So this section up here, the top third, a signature at the bottom by Ann Putnam. Wow. In 1692, she was one of the chief accusers, 12 years old. And this is her confession of forgiveness so that she can become a full church member of the Church of Christ at Salem Village.
I desire to be humble before God, that I, even being in my childhood, should by such a providence of God be made an instrument for accusing several persons of a grievous crime, whom now I have just grounds and good reason to believe they were innocent persons, and that it was a great delusion of Satan that deceived me in that sad time.
Always with the caveat that the devil made me do it.
Right, just following orders, just following the devil's orders.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about how property factored into accusations of witchcraft back then, people accusing another person as a way to sort of get their land or get their house.
No, that wasn't the case. The state could take all of what's called your movable estate, your cows, your wedding ring, your furniture, but they couldn't take your land.
Some of the reported levels of toxic metals were alarmingly high, so I'm meeting with geologist Kazar Berg to interpret what the test results mean. So when I went to Danvers, I took a few samples from the soccer field itself, and then a few from a cemetery, which is about 5 miles away. I'd love for you to look at these results.
Okay, I'll take a look. Out of the 4 samples from the cemetery, it seems that 2 are on the lower end. The other 2 out of the 4 have 47 and 39.
Now, when I was in the lab talking to Tally, I thought that the 47 seemed to be excessive. What is the natural range that occurs in Massachusetts?
Upon first glance, it seems kind of scary. Massachusetts actually has a range of 7 to 40 milligrams over kilograms. That is considered naturally occurring. Anything higher than that is environmental factors from humans, like agriculture, pollution.
So what do high levels of arsenic mean, and what risk does that pose to the population living there?
Neurological damage, neuromuscular damage, but that is actually being exposed to high levels of it over a long duration of time.
Is it possible that prolonged exposure to a heavy metal could cause somebody to have neurological damage, to act out?
I mean, we have cases in history where that has happened. Have you ever heard the phrase mad as a hatter?
Mad as a hatter,
yeah. So back in the 17th and 1800s, they would use mercury in the hat-making process, and they actually ended up showing signs of dementia. But that is an example of prolonged exposure to high concentrations, though.
Right.
Because he was literally working with mercury with his hands every day.
Let's talk specifically about the samples that were taken from the soccer field. If you're looking at 11 or 12, in your opinion, would that be enough to cause things like vocal tics, outbursts, hiccups?
I don't believe so, because the way to get arsenic poisoning, the most common way, is ingestion. And I doubt these high school girls are eating handfuls of the dirt every day during practice. If it is from the groundwater, let's say if it leached from the soil into the groundwater, I feel like more people would be affected instead of just isolated incidents at the same high school.
You would be seeing these sort of things throughout Massachusetts and not just in this one particular area.
Exactly, yeah.
The soil test results did not convince me that the high school incident was triggered by something in the environment. But I do have another lead I want to follow up on. Dr. Robert Bartholomew is a medical sociologist who studied this incident in depth.
I've always been interested in bizarre behavior, and an outbreak of hiccuping at a school for over a year is pretty bizarre behavior.
Now, how would you compare and contrast what happened at Danvers as compared to what happened in Old Salem?
It's the same phenomena. It's just a different cultural setting that has colored the symptoms. Motor symptoms, that's what the vocal tics are. And once these start, you get an imitation of behaviors. And that's what was going on in Salem as well.
So do you believe in demonic possession, or do you think that's more of a cultural issue?
Very clearly, it's a cultural phenomenon. And if you think you've been possessed by a demon, to you it's real. Now you're going to act and behave like it's real. And in Salem in 1692, this would have been absolute proof that there are demons and the devil is amongst us.